Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, and as always, we are doing breaches of the week. And before we begin, I'd like to thank the following people: Barrett Peterson, Sander Slidnerink, Jay Dance, and Andy Warson for sending me a lot of these. It really helps me. Thank you very much. And with that, let's dive right in because we have an absolute, and I mean absolute, ton of ground to cover today. First, I'm going to give you an update on Wawa. This is the supermarket on the east coast of the United States that went through a massive data breach in 2019. They just agreed to pay $8 million to end an investigation into that 2019 data breach that affected about 34 million credit cards used at its convenience stores and gas stations. And that is according to this past Tuesday's statement from two state attorneys general that were co-leading this probe. Wawa obviously paying out. You may be entitled to compensation if you're a customer of theirs. Moving on, let's talk about Paytm Mall. And this is actually a seriously interesting one, because Troy Hunt, who is the founder of Have I Been Pwned, basically that's a platform that basically you can go and look up your credentials to see if they've been in a data breach. Basically, they had earlier claimed that a data breach occurred at the Paytm Mall in 2020. Now they've basically revealed that after a chat with Paytm's team, they discovered that the data did not originate from Paytm and that it was actually fabricated, meaning Paytm apparently didn't have a breach. Now, this is according, and I quote directly, Troy Hunt's tweet on this matter. An update on this breach. After loading it into Have I Been Pwned, the head of Paytm's InfoSec team reached out and we had a chat about the authenticity of the data, which they believe did not originate from them. We now collectively believe it's fabricated. Paytm is one of the largest wallet and payment service platforms, reportedly suffered a massive breach in 2020. While the company had not accepted that, it had been reported that they had received a ransom demand after that breach. So your guess is as good as mine. It could have simply been aggregating data and putting it together, looking like Paytm customers, for like credential stuffing, those kinds of things. I don't know. But nevertheless, if you thought you were caught up in the Paytm Mall data breach in 2020, you may not have been, because it might not have existed. Interesting. I will keep you up to date on that. Moving on, let's talk about K Smith, because apparently they're a financial vendor for healthcare outfits. Now, their data breach happened in late May and impacted customers billed in that month. The vendor discovered the breach in June and then informed, obviously, basically the world on July 6th. Healthcare systems are now declaring, and given the reporting on this, what we are talking about is potentially patient name, insured name, address, phone number, ID number, date of birth, last 5 digits of social security number, description of services, amount billed, outstanding balance, payment due, and the status of the account. The only one so far to declare, due to K Smith, that I could find was St. Luke's Health System in the state of Idaho for 31,573 patients. So if you're in Idaho and using St. Luke's, heads up to you. Moving on, let's talk about the Allegheny Health Network. They recently, or rather, they had an employee recently open a malicious web link compromising, the email account and breaching the health records for about 8,000 of their patients. Now, this breach occurred between May 31st and June 1st, and we are talking about patients' names, birth dates, dates of medical care, medical history, and other data. In a small number of cases, social security numbers or financial account information may have been accessed, so heads up to you, all you Allegheny Health Network patients. Moving on. Let's talk about Vista Bank, based out of Dallas, Texas. On July 19th of this year, they reported a data breach to the Office of the Attorney General of Texas. According to Vista Bank, we're talking about names, social security numbers, and financial information of quote-unquote certain individuals being compromised. I have no more information on that, but if you are a Vista Bank member, I guess, go check in. Moving on, let's talk about One Touch Point out of Wisconsin. This is actually another healthcare supply chain breach this week, affecting at least 30 healthcare firms. Now, this was a ransom hit, and essentially they got basically person identifiable information, PII, stored on their, basically exposed. Now, we are talking about names, addresses, birth dates, dates of service, description of service, diagnosis codes, information provided as part of a health assessment or member ID, and for apparently just one customer, social security numbers were also included from that healthcare system. And we are talking about a whole bunch. So strap in, because if you belong to one of these, essentially you are going to have to basically check in. Let's put it that way. So we've got Common Ground Healthcare Cooperative, Banner Medicare Advantage Dual, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Arizona, Medison, aka Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona Advantage, Health Choice Arizona, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, BMC Health Net Plan, WellSense Plan, Care First Advantage, Commonwealth Care Alliance, Elder Plan Home First, Emblem Plan, Florida Blue, Geisinger, Health Alliance Plan of Michigan, HAP, Midwest Health Plan, Health First, Health New England, Health Plan of San Mateo, Health Partners, Highmark Health, Humana, Kaiser Permanente, KS Plan Administrators, MVP Health, Pacific Source, Primera Blue Cross, Medicare Advantage Plans, Primetime Health, Point 32 Health, Regions Blue Cross, Blue Shield of Oregon, Regions Blue Cross, Blue Shield of Utah, Regions Blue Shield, apparently, Regions Blue Shield of Idaho as well, UPMC Health Plan, and Matrix Medical Network. There you go. That is obviously an important healthcare supply chain breach, but we are not done because we have yet another supply chain breach in the healthcare system. This time, a company called LifeWorks USA is what's happening here. Now, on May 17th of this year, a now former LifeWorks employee basically emailed spreadsheets containing personally identifiable information to their personal email address and copied the personal email address of another former LifeWorks employee. That's all it takes. Insider threat. Never a good thing. So by virtue of that, once again, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts had to start notifying people, as well as Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts HMO Blue. So if you have anything to do with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts or Massachusetts HMO, you got screwed this week. Coming and going. You really did. Moving on. Let's talk about the city of South Plainfield in New Jersey. An assistant in the municipal clerk's office deleted confidential documents and files, as well as borough incoming and outgoing emails, but before doing so, he copied them on a personal flash drive, according to a letter sent to residents who may have been affected by this data breach. Now, borough officials discovered this breach in February, but did not notify the affected residents until this month. Needless to say, the residents were not happy about this. Now, the assistant left the borough's employment on February 18th of this year. During his 4+ years in that position, he was entrusted with confidential documents. According to the letter, he admitted to destroying birth, marriage, and death certificates, along with driver's license and passport information, which obviously contained highly confidential information like social security numbers, and on and on. He also deleted borough incoming and outgoing emails. Once again, insider threat is a huge, huge problem. Moving on, let's talk about Boeing Employees Credit Union, because on July 25th of this year, they filed an official notice of data breach with various government entities after the company learned of a network security incident at a third-party vendor affecting Boeing Employee Credit Union customers. Now, according to them, we are talking names, addresses, account numbers, credit scores, social security numbers of certain individuals as well. Now, according to the most recent information, on June 6th of this year, they became aware that basically the company's printing vendor experienced a network security incident. I do not know who that vendor is, but if I do, I'll obviously let you know. But heads up, Boeing Employee Credit Union members. Moving on. We have to talk about another supply chain data breach, which was digital marketing platform Wordfly. In this case, they're used by the arts community as well as various sports teams. They have been down for at least 17 days due to since the publication that I read, which was a couple of days ago, so maybe 20 days by now. Hopefully they're back on their feet due to a ransomware attack. And by virtue of that, the Cleveland Museum of Art, the Smithsonian, as well as the Toronto Symphony Orchestra have already declared data breaches, with obviously many more to come. Now, the TSO, or Toronto Symphony Orchestra, gives us insight into the level of information in the play here, because according to their data breach notification to Canadian authorities, names, email addresses, TSO patron IDs, and information about your TSO count. It may also include personal information certain patrons have volunteered to the TSO when responding to a survey, such as demographic information and opinions on the TSO. And I have to imagine those opinions are going to be slightly lower thanks to Wordfly now. So there you go. If your entity uses Wordfly, or you're a patron of the arts and have filled out surveys or logged into your favorite local symphony or whatever it is, you might want to check in because they may actually be caught up in this. And here we are. Moving on, let's talk about Avamere Holdings out of Oregon. Between January 19th of this year through March 17th, an unauthorized individual gained access to third-party hosted network infrastructure that was used by Avamere Health Services. We are talking about 96 senior living and healthcare facilities affected. These are in the state of Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, and Arizona, various names. If you have anything to do with a senior living and healthcare facility in any one of those states, definitely check in on the Avera's breach notification. They list out all 96, but I just rattled off 30 major health systems, so you can do the homework on that one. Moving on. Let's talk about Gannon Associates Insurance Agency, because on July 26th, they reported a data breach after the company experienced a quote-unquote information security incident. Now, according to Gannon, the breach resulted in full names, social security numbers, and driver's license numbers of certain individuals being compromised. On June 14th of this year, Gannon learned that an unauthorized party may have gained access to their computer systems and may have removed certain files. That, to me, seems like it's probably a ransomware attack, but we don't know, and they're not saying just yet. I'll obviously keep you up to date there. Moving on, we have to talk about the Italian Internal Revenue Service. This is basically Italy's IRS, and I am not even going to try pronouncing that one for you because I don't want to piss off any of my Italian friends and colleagues. Now, Italian authorities are investigating claims made by the Lockbit ransomware gang that they breached the network of the Italian IRS. Now, Lockbit claims they stole 100 gigabytes of data, including many documents, scans, financial reports, and contracts that will be leaked online if the Italian tax agency doesn't pay the ransom demand on August 1st. Obviously, that is tomorrow. Good luck to you, Italian IRS. We're with you. Moving on, let's talk about Just Talk, because Just Talk is a messaging app that basically touted their security, and they have been found to store messages sent by their users in an unencrypted state after they were leaked. In a report by TechCrunch with the help of security researcher Anurag Sen, claims by the company behind Just Talk, basically they're claiming that they use end-to-end encryption were proven false. Now, a huge internal data cache, including not just millions of messages by users of the app, but also their timestamps and phone numbers that the messages were sent and received by, this also extends to call records as well. So if you're using Just Talk for all your secure end-to-end encrypted messaging needs, they lied to you, they've got everything completely exposed, and you've been exposed as well. Time to change to Signal. Moving on, let's talk about City of Detroit retirees, because there's a new warning about an alleged data breach affecting some of the City of Detroit's retirees. Personal information, including social security numbers, appear to have been exposed online. Now, a Detroit retiree stumbled upon this past Wednesday morning, after setting up her account on the City of Detroit's retirement system's new online program. And I quote her, "I saw several links called lists, and I clicked on one, and it was my name, and this first list was 8 pages, my name and several other people. Some of them I knew, some of them I didn't know. It was their name and it was their social security number." So in other words, somebody screwed up the programming, and when this retiree went to set up their account, they were exposed to other retirees' information, which means another retiree was exposed to her, and on and on and on and on. So if you are a City of Detroit retiree, you definitely want to check in, make sure you're good to go. They actually may owe you some compensation there too at some point. Moving on. Let's talk about the ADA, or American Dental Association, because they recently began notifying state regulators that the quote-unquote cybersecurity incident that they reported back in April was actually a ransomware attack, which led to the theft of their member data. Obviously, the American Dental Association being pretty flippin' huge. There are dentists everywhere. Now, on April 23rd, the ADA first reported to its members that there was a cybersecurity incident, and it was causing technical issues and other disruptions for some of their clients, including both the Texas and New York dental associations. Apparently those are subsidiaries or some way, shape, or form. So heads up to you if you're a dentist or part of the ADA in any which way, shape, or form, and it was a ransomware attack, you might have been caught up with it. You might want to go and check in with your governing body. Moving on, let's talk about the Wootton Upper School and Kimberley College. These are both owned by Wootton Academy Trust in Bedfordshire, England. Now, the Hive ransomware group is allegedly demanding £500,000, roughly $608,000 US, from these two schools in England following a hack targeting their IT systems, according to reports in British media. The report did not say what data was exposed, but heads up to you if you have anything to do with Wootton Upper School or Kimberley College in Bedfordshire, England. you definitely want to check in. And moving on, let's talk about Twitter, because as many as 5.4 million of the Twitter users have had their personal details exposed in a massive data breach. Now, this cache of personal details stolen from Twitter is selling on hacker forums with an asking price of $30,000 US. Now, Twitter confirmed the breach, explaining that the attackers exploited a vulnerability from December of 2021. The data reportedly includes names, phone numbers, and email addresses of 5.4 million Twitter users. Some of the exposed users include celebrities and company accounts as well. So heads up to you, Twitter users, I should go check in myself. And finally, and we have two finalies for you. The first one is actually coming from IBM, that is the International Business Machines, the behemoth. We are going to talk about the current cost of data breaches according to them. Now, the average cost of a data breach, according to their new report, globally now stands at $4.35 million, which is up nearly 13% from the 2020 figures, and that is a new all-time record, according to IBM. Now, IBM's annual cost of a data breach report, now in its 17th year, was compiled from interviews with 550 organizations in 17 countries that were breached between March of 2021 through March of 2022. Now, aside from the headline findings, which represent a 2.6% increase on last year's report, IBM claimed that consumers are suffering disproportionately from these incidents. They said basically that 60% of breached organizations increased their prices following a data breach. Obviously, that is adding to the inflation that we are seeing right now. Essentially, what they are talking about is a data breach tax, meaning a company gets hit, you're buying their products, they obviously have a huge problem, so they increase their prices to offset the cost of the breach. Now the cost of their data breach is being passed along to the consumers, you and I. We have a data breach tax. That's absolutely crazy. Now, phishing is the most expensive cause of breach events, resulting in average cost of $4.9 million for victim organizations, while compromised credentials are the most common cause at 19% of all breaches, according to IBM. Healthcare remains the sector which costs are the highest. That is typically true. Healthcare tends to pay fast on ransomware, so they're targeted very heavily. For the 12th year in a row, it has led the pack, with breach costs in 2022 increasing nearly $1 million to reach over $10 million on average per breach in the healthcare sector. That is bonkers. Remember, the average is 4.35. Now, the U.S. remained the most expensive country with average costs of $9.4 million. If you didn't know, the United States is the most targeted, is the most targeted country in the world for cyber attack. Now, there were also interesting insights for CISOs in critical infrastructure organizations who may be considering zero trust strategies. And I found these numbers to be really interesting as well. Some 80% of those surveyed from the sector said they have not adopted a zero trust approach, whether it's ZTNA or another type of zero trust adoption, zero trust networking access, for those who don't know what ZTNA is. Now, this saw their breach costs increase by nearly 1.2 million over those who actually did adopt zero trust, to reach 5.4 million in total, meaning zero trust is lowering the cost on average of your data breach, because it's a hell of a lot harder to hit you when you're running zero trust. Now, there was also a word of warning for organizations who would pay their extorters if compromised by ransomware. Respondents who did only saw a $610,000 US less average breach cost, meaning you paid the attackers, but you really aren't recouping it, meaning your turnaround time for recovery is only $610,000 better, which really isn't that much, especially for a large organization. Now, when the ransomware itself is included, the breach costs could become significantly more. The average cost of a ransom attack without the ransom payment was $4.5 million. Now, 45% of recorded breaches occurred in the cloud, with those who had not yet formulated a security strategy or were in the early stages of doing so, and were liable to pay on average $660,000 more than those with a mature cloud security posture. Meaning, as you adopt the cloud, you've got to approach it security first. Otherwise, if you're just winging it, you're going to just end up with more problems. We actually see this all the time when we do assessments and we audit things like AWS security controls or Azure security controls, and like 80% of these controls are just never enabled because a lot of people just don't know they exist, or they don't get qualified people to do it. This is a huge problem, but I digress. Now, breaches seemed inevitable because 83% of organizations studied said they had suffered more than one. However, detection and response is getting better, but it's still not great. Now, the average time to identify and contain a data breach fell from 287 days in 2021 to 277 days in 2022. That's a decrease of 3.5%, but that's like 6 months. That's like more than 6 months that you have not identified and contained a data breach. Organizations running XDR saved another additional 29 days. Still not the best, but obviously if you're running XDR, EDR, MDR, NDR, et cetera, meaning endpoint detection response, network detection response, managed detection response, all those kinds of things, you do have a better turnaround time, especially if it's managed and monitored. Now, the biggest cost savings identified in the report was actually the use of security AI, or artificial intelligence, as well as automation technology. Those organizations running those incurred $3 million less on average in breach costs. So when we're looking at things like SIEMs or SIMs, a security information and events management solution, letting the artificial intelligence do a lot of that work for you obviously is a huge thing. But again, I think the most important thing is to understand that these breaches are being passed along to you and I, which are obviously not helping inflation. We have massive amounts, billions of dollars of breaches every single year. And if a lot of those are being passed down to the consumers, that is contributing to global shortages, global taxation, more expensive food, whatever that is. So we have a cyber tax, and I think that's important to understand. And finally, I'm going to end with the U.S. federal court system, because this one is absolutely nuts, but here we are. The Justice Department is investigating a data breach of the U.S. federal court system dating back to early 2020, and this is according to a recent testimony on Capitol Hill this past Thursday. Now, here's what happened. The U.S. court system put out a statement in January of 2021 acknowledging that its case management / electronic case file systems, or CMECF, had been compromised as part of a massive breach. As a result, procedures for filing highly sensitive documents were changed so that they could only be handled via paper documents, a secure electronic device, or through a secure order system. Meaning, basically, if you had, let's say, a very sensitive sealed federal court case for whatever reason, you had it potentially exposed, which means it could be a ton of this information out there or in the hands of an adversarial country. Now, scary scenario for the judicial branch. For example, House Judiciary Committee Chair Gerald Nadler told lawmakers that, quote, 3 hostile foreign actors, end quote, attacked the U.S. court document filing system as part of this breach, causing a, quote unquote, system security failure. The comments at a committee hearing at the oversight of the Justice Department's National Security Division were the first public disclosures of this particular attack. Now, Representative Nadler also said that the committee learned in March about the quote-unquote startling breadth and scope of this data breach, which was separate from the SolarWinds attack revealed in late 2020, meaning this was actually separate from that incident. And so if you're thinking, well, if they got hit in 2020, the entire government got hit in 2020 in SolarWinds, no, this is above and beyond that. Obviously, if you recall, SolarWinds involved the Russian government, basically, or rather their backed hackers infiltrating basically networks of dozens of U.S. federal agencies, not to mention corporations from small to massive, and on and on and on. Now, Assistant Attorney General for National Security Matthew Olsen also testified to the committee that they are working basically, quote unquote, working very closely with the judicial conferences and judges around the country to address this issue. And they committed to updating the committee and hopefully all of us on that investigation. Now, the wider impact of this is I think pretty profound. A committee aide said that Representative Nadler's questions came after the committee received a briefing on the attack, noting that, quote, the sweeping impact it may have had on the operation of the Department of Justice is staggering. Obviously, that aide was granted anonymity by the publication I'm reporting this from, which is Politico. So this obviously is a huge issue, but court filings and court system is obviously a very, very sensitive thing. Imagine being accused of something and you are not guilty and all of those documents or records are sealed. Well, imagine if somebody steals those, are able to alter those or expose those things. Not to mention, we have a lot of victims that are not named. Let's say, look at a prolific serial something or other, like off the top of my head, like Bill Cosby or R. Kelly. They basically were abusing just dozens and dozens of dozens of women, a lot of those are sealed. Their names don't want to get out for fear of harassment, threats, whatever that is. Imagine if all of that stuff was now exposed into the light of day. This is a huge, huge problem across the United States. And according to Representative Nadler, if 3 foreign bad actors were involved in this, God knows who has this information. This is a huge, huge problem. And so I will obviously keep you up to date on this, but that's where I've got to end it, not to not make you sleep at night, but because this is a huge problem. And so those were your breaches of the week. If you're here in the United States and you've ever been in the federal court system, you were definitely affected, not to mention just all the healthcare breaches this week. My God. Plus, we're all affected globally by a cyber tax for data breaches, and that sucks. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at Nick AESP, where I promise I will not tax you, nor will I tax you when you subscribe to me on YouTube, which you should. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private. Thanks, everyone.